We're talking today with Mr. E.J. Katerberg of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Mr. Katerberg, can you begin by giving us a little bit of your personal background? For instance, where and when were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids Township on the east end of Grand Rapids by Twin Lakes in August 13, 1922.
All right. Now, what did your father do for a living?
My father, we had a truck farm, vegetables, road vegetables, and so I worked on the farm till I was old enough to get a job and as quick as I could get off the farm.
So your father was able to keep that farm through the 30s and through the Depression?
Oh yeah, yep, he was fortunate.
It was sort of always a market for the food, and you grew some of your own food? Or?
Oh, we grow it to sell it.
Right.
That's how he made a living. And we had 9 children in the family, so there was, a lot of mouths to be fed. But also there was a lot of help that we could that he could use to do the work on that farm. So it was a small farm, 40 acres, so it wasn't a big farm at all.
But you could sell the produce locally and so forth. And
most of the time it was right on the local farmers market.
Right.
There was one on Fulton and another one on West Leonard, another one on the south end. And we'd go to probably 2 of them, and usually Fulton Street was always our best market.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's still a Fulton Street market.
Oh yeah, still there.
Still a fine place to go.
Yep.
Okay. Now, did you finish high school?
Never went to high school.
Okay, so you went through the 8th grade?
8th grade, yeah, and Dad says it's time to go to work.
All right.
So sorry but it didn't. None of us boys went on to high school.
Yeah. Well,
and yet it turns out that all of us had our own businesses, and we all did fairly well. So
now, did you, once you kind of finished school, did you simply go to work on the farm, or did you take a job someplace else?
No, we would work. I wasn't old enough really to work anywhere else, but worked on the farm, and then I'd do some odd jobs with a neighbor who has a little landscape company, and so at times we'd work for him and earn a little side money. Yeah.
All right. Now, as you're getting older, it's getting into 1940 and 1941. Were you paying any attention to what was going on in the world? Were you aware that there was a war in Europe and all that?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, because of course I had 3 brothers, and so we knew that some of us would be going into the service without a doubt.
Now,
Turns out that all of us had gone in.
Now, did you have older brothers, or were you the oldest?
I had 2 older brothers and 1 younger brother.
Okay. Now, were any of them drafted before Pearl Harbor, or did they?
I think my brother just older than I was drafted, and he was in the cavalry out in Fort Kansas. Fort Riley, Kansas. Fort Riley, Kansas. And he, in fact, before we went into the service, a real good friend of mine and I took a trip out there. He said, well, that was our last hooray, and so we took a nice trip, and we went out to see him out in Kansas.
At that point, was it still horse cavalry?
It changed just as he drove or rode horses just a little while, and then they went to mechanized.
Okay.
And then he was a crane operator. Yeah.
All right. Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
No, not exactly. I guess I should have known, but I don't remember. Okay. I don't remember.
Now, once that happened, were you expecting probably you were going to get called up, or?
Sure. In fact, it was the day after my birthday that I got my call. It says your friends and neighbors have asked you to go in the service, and so.
Okay, but just after your birthday in 42?
In 42.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was and a day later I got my notice, and so.
Okay. Now, had you given any thought to enlisting before that, or did you figure?
I did. I tried to enlist in the Marines, and I had some dental problems, and they said, no, we can't use you.
All right.
So probably just as well.
Okay. So now you get your draft notice. It's August of 1942. Where now? Did you have to report someplace right away, or did you wait around to get
No,
orders?
it was in November, or I think the last of October. We all got on a bus downtown Grand Rapids, I think it was down at the depot, down to the big depot down there. And then we went to Fort Custer and Battle Creek.
Right. Now, at Fort Custer, were they just kind of processing you there? And
really, all they did there was give us whatever clothes they could halfway make us fit into. And so we were there probably 2 days is all, just long enough to get our stuff together and get ready to go somewhere.
All right. Now, were you going in with guys that you knew, or were these just people from all over the place, or all over?
Just all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're at Fort Custer for 2 days. Then what happens?
Then they said we're going to move you to another camp, and so we all loaded on the train. And as we left, they came through and said, anytime you get near a village or a city, you have to draw all the drapes, and you couldn't sneak out or couldn't look out between the cars or anything. They were very fussy. And of course, being new recruits, we were scared to death that we'd do something wrong. So,
Right. Well, I don't know. Now, where did they send you?
That was to Camp Adair, Oregon, which is by Corvallis.
All right. So that's an awfully long trip. How long did it take you to get out there?
I think 5 days.
All right. Now, during the course of that 5 days, didn't you guys look out the window?
Well, we could when we were out in the farm country or whatever, but not when there was any sign of a city or a village. Boy, they would make sure everybody drew the drapes right down, and you better not get caught looking out. But
okay. Now, what did you do for 5 days? You're just sitting there on the train.
I guess we didn't do much of anything. You didn't have any paper. You can't go out and pick up a paper off the street. So we just kind of sat and chatted and probably found out who people were and where they were from, and so we got to know people pretty well by the time we got to Camp Adair.
Okay, but there wasn't any place along the way where they let you get off the train or anything else like that?
No.
All right.
That was a long train ride.
Had you ever taken a long train ride like that before?
No.
Okay, so kind of a new thing there. Now, you get out then to Oregon. Now, what was Camp Adair like? What condition was that in?
It was a brand new camp. It was just farmland all the way around. It was probably in the Willamette Valley, and so we got off the train, and it was raining, and it rained every day, and I mean every day until next spring, and that was like Michigan if you have snow. Well, they have rain, and you put on your raincoat every day, just like you put your pants on. You step out with a raincoat on every day.
Now, when you got there, were you greeted right away by drill sergeants and stuff, or did they take a little time before they started the military discipline?
They weren't too tough. These people there was a cadre there, and so maybe it would only be one in probably in a company, probably about 6-7 people maybe, and that was all. So they were pretty decent. In fact, it turns out that I did get to know one of the fellows that was in the cadre. He was from Grand Rapids, and so I had known him just a little bit before. So yeah.
All right. So describe what's going on at camp at Adair. Was it just basic training, or was there more going on than that?
No, pretty much basic training. I should mention that I was in the division headquarters. And
what division was that?
96 Infantry.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, was that a new formation? Were they just creating it at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
All right. And at what point did you get assigned to division headquarters? Had you done basic training first, or did they pull you out pretty quickly?
No, it was right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, were you kind of the first batch of recruits to come in to help fill out the ranks of the division, or were there a lot of guys already there?
No, I guess I don't know how many because the camp was spread out pretty far. But it seemed that we were on the one end where there was all the special troops, and like the artillery and medics,
signals and supply and all that kind of
quartermaster.
Right.
So they were sort of together. So we really didn't see, in fact, I think it was, probably a week or two before they'd even let us leave the area.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't do much wandering around.
Okay, so you were not being assigned to a rifle company or one of the regular regiments or
No.
any of that part
No.
of things. You were attached basically to divisional headquarters from
Right.
the beginning. Now, given that you're not there with the line companies and so forth, what sort of training did they give you? Were you still marching around and learning Army discipline?
We did quite a bit of that. However, I was, again, pretty fortunate that this was one of the early times when we came out and stand in order, and the company commander said, "Can anybody drive a vehicle or drive a truck?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I can drive a truck. I'd been on the farm, drove a farm truck." So everybody, "Kids, you get in the wheelbarrow." Well, it turns out I didn't get the wheelbarrow, so I was sent over to the motor pool, and there was a civilian driver training person there, and so he took me out for a road test and says, "Hey, you can drive just as well as anybody else." So he gave me a driver's license. So I had a driver's license right from about probably the first week I was in the service.
All right.
And so that gave me a lot of free time, because a lot of them say, "Well, hey, so and so wants to have you bring them to town or go here or there." So I didn't have to go out and do a lot of, I never had KP the whole time I was in service, because I had.
So your job was basically to wait for orders to go drive somebody someplace.
Correct.
And then if you took them into a town or anything else like that, you just basically were on your own until you had to meet them to take
You
them
just,
back?
you usually stayed right there, right with the vehicle, of course, and usually right wherever they were on to be. Yeah.
Now, were there people that you were the regular driver for? Did you drive everybody around?
No, usually I drove for the division surgeon or the division dental officer, and but otherwise there was the driver that was assigned to the division commander. That was all he did, and also the assistant division commander. He had his own private driver, so yeah.
Okay. Now, what was the surgeon like? What sort of character was he?
Well, he was a country doctor from down in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a real little fella, just a typical Southern little doctor, and he was always so concerned about whether you were healthy or whether you're not getting cold, are you? And I said, "No, I'm fine." But he was just such a regular person. You wouldn't really think of him as being a military man, but of course he wasn't really, because he had been drafted probably as a doctor.
Yeah, so he was out of civilian life too.
Yeah.
Now, were some of the senior officers and people probably career Army types? I mean, ones that they're building the division around?
They're both the division commander and the assistant commander. They were regular Army.
Right.
And also, right in our own company, we had the first sergeant, who is he's the big man. He's as much boss as the company the officer.
Right.
But I can remember one time we had gotten a second lieutenant in there from something and from somewhere, I think probably just out of OCS.
Yep.
And he was going to tell this first sergeant about, "You be sure you do this," and he says, and he just pointed a finger at him, and he says, "I'll tell you." He said, "I've been around here. In fact, if you don't think so, go ask the General Bradley." So they were good friends, our first sergeant and General Bradley himself. So
about how old do you think the first sergeant was? Maybe in his 40s?
Oh, he's probably, I bet you 40, 45. Yeah, at least that. But he didn't go overseas with us either. He was probably too old for going overseas duty.
That kind of duty. Yeah. All right. Now, how did you adapt to Army life? Was it a relatively easy transition for you?
Very easy. Yeah, I never had any problem.
Of course, I guess you didn't have to worry. Now, at the headquarters, did they enforce all the rules about discipline and who you salute and all of that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, In fact, we had a group of fellows that worked in the office, and some of them were they were attorneys and whatever in civilian life, and but they were the kind that they come out with a robe on in the morning and then slippers, and that's how they fell out. And the company commander, the first sergeant said, "This is going to cease." Well, the next day they said the same thing, and he says, "Okay, I'm out for a mile run."
Right.
So there we took off, and the guys in their slippers. I think that was the last trip that they ever wore the slippers. Yeah.
It's an effective way of dealing with that. All right. Now, about how long were you in Camp Adair? Was that sort of maybe, I guess in your schedule here, you got to November to April, sort of, so maybe.
Yeah.
April
That'd probably be
43?
right.
Okay. Then you get a furlough at that point when you finish your basic training?
Yes.
And what did you do on the furlough?
Well, went home and just sort of enjoyed civilian life, except that we had to wear a uniform. We couldn't. They wouldn't let us just get in our city street clothes anymore.
Okay. Now, when you went home, were you just traveling on a regular train then at that point? You
Yep.
just traveling like anybody else?
Yeah.
How did people treat guys in uniform at that point? Just take it for granted because everybody was wearing a uniform?
Almost, yeah. Now some places they were just thrilled to have you around. When we were at Camp White, there was a little village, and we used to go there because it was kind of a neat little place. They had a little USO, and so we'd go there, and these people would fix us a chicken dinner, and they couldn't do enough for us because they said, you guys are doing everything for us, and so we'd like to help out just a little bit where we can. So it was pretty nice.
All right. So you get home and then turn around and go back again. Where do they station you next?
Well, I went right back to Camp Adair, and I'm quite sure it was from Camp Adair where I went on furlough.
Yeah, you were still at Camp Adair when you were in furlough, and then you're back there for a few weeks, and then you go on to Fort Lewis in Washington from there?
Fort Lewis, Washington, yeah. That was a big Army, a big, what do you call it, permanent base. They had all brick barracks and everything there, big parade ground, and I always enjoyed being in a parade. I love to march, and but not everybody did. There was, in fact, we had one fellow that he was from Grand Rapids area, and he absolutely could not march. His feet would just kind of go kind of bouncy up and down, and they finally said, just stay away. Don't even bother with us because you mess everybody up. So, but it was interesting. I enjoyed it, and I know a lot of people say, well, why do they teach you close order drill and these kind of things? And well, all it is discipline.
Right.
So you know when to react and react fast. You don't, and people never used to understand it. They said, well, it seems kind of silly just to do that. Well, it's not silly at all, because what you're doing is learning to take orders and act on them instantly.
Right. Okay. Now, with the kind of experience you had, they didn't give you a whole lot of actual combat training or anything then, did they?
No.
Did you get any weapons training at all?
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, we always had our weapons, and we'd go on to out to the rifle range, and I got to be. I was a pretty good shot. I enjoyed shooting too.
Now, had you done any hunting or anything like that when you were a kid?
I was not. I did some, but I really was not a big hunter. No.
Okay. So,
No.
All right. Now, you're not at Fort Lewis too long, then. They move you on back into Oregon again.
Yep.
So you go on maneuvers at that point?
That was when we went down to Bend, Oregon, which is down in it's kind of like Texas, in the sagebrush, and so we were down there, and that was while we were there was, maybe I told you the story about this colonel. He would get me up in the middle of the night. I think I told that story. How he was always concerned that people are cold and that they're this, and so he was kind of interesting.
This was the divisional surgeon.
Yes, yes.
And so kind of explain here on camera here. Well, what did this guy do? I mean, how did he go about doing that? He would like get you up in the middle of the night, or?
Oh yeah. Maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, he'd be over and he'd just kind of whisper by your tent and says, "We have to go down to the hospital." And I remember one time, that was overseas, but it's an interesting story. There was, I had to take the division surgeon to a field hospital, and he said, "I want you to come in with me," because he said, "This is an interesting case." He said, I got the word that there was a soldier that was shot right through his head, and a bullet went in and came out the other side. And there was I think the man's name was Dr. Weinstein from New York. He had operated on this young man, and when we got there, this fellow was alert and everything else, and they said it was an unusual, abnormal brain the way the bullet went through it. Otherwise, it would have gone right through the brain. But this was some abnormality, and it went between the real brain. So, yeah.
Anything important?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the division is on maneuvers, what were you doing? Were you just kind of staying at headquarters and not doing much? Or?
Yeah, we would have to. They would get the officers, dental officers, and the other. They would set up a hospital, just like you're out in the battlefield. And so we'd have to go there and bring them to maybe an aid station or whatever. So we were kept fairly busy.
All right. Now, about how long do you think you were out on maneuvers? Was that a matter of a week?
Oh, no, we were probably, I'd say about 3 weeks that we were there, yeah.
And where are you sleeping when you're doing that? Just in tents?
In tent, yeah.
All right. Okay. Then where do you go after that? You're on maneuvers in Bend, and then...
And I think we went to Camp White, Oregon.
And where in Oregon was that? Was it... I think it was like in the mountains or in the valley, or still out farther east, or?
It was I wish I could remember. Probably more south than, yeah.
Okay, and this was the place where you had kind of the small town nearby that had the USO set up and that kind of thing. Well, so they would feed you with the USO. Did they have dances or things like that?
Oh, they did some, but mainly they had pool tables and ping pong tables, and they would different people come up and they'd invite you to come over for dinner or for coffee or whatever. And it was a typical just small town. In fact, the one fellow that we got acquainted with real well, he was a village blacksmith, and he had his own blacksmith shop there. So, yeah. So
there were still horses to put shoes on.
Oh yeah,
that kind of thing.
Sure.
All right. Now at this point you've been in the Army for something past a year. Were you beginning to wonder if you were ever going to go anywhere and do anything by that time?
No, I guess we knew we would go. The word was out that we were going to the South Pacific, but of course you don't know that because there were division on the east side of the state that they sent to the South Pacific too. But we figured because we're on the West Coast that we would go there.
It was a lot. And were you paying attention to the progress of the war at all? Were you following the news?
Oh, as much as we could. Yeah, we read the papers and listen to the radio. Of course, it was long before TV. So.
All right. Now we get toward the end of '43. Let's see. Did you get to go home for Christmas that year? Was a furlough in there?
I did get home. I don't remember if it was for Christmas.
Well, I guess they've got you. You have dates here, December 14th to I guess 29. So
okay, so I was home for Christmas. Yeah.
Right.
Those are kind of foggy, after a long time ago.
Was it kind of an odd experience to kind of go back and forth between being in the Army and then being back home again? And
not really. No, I think you get integrated into the service mode real quick, and you get you don't really get to be in civilian life just that week or two that you're home.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now after that, you come back again. You're at Camp White for a few more months after that. And then, now at this point, have you basically been serving with the same group of people the whole time?
All time.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
you've got your kind of corps of soldiers and so forth. And,
Yep.
and do they work together pretty well? Do the people in the headquarters company kind of
Oh,
get
yeah.
along with each other?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I ever seen a time when there was animosity of any kind. Everybody knew they were in, and they had to be there, and so they accepted the fact that when the war is over, we're going home, and that was it.
Okay. All right. Now, they eventually move you out of Camp White. Let's see. It goes. Let's see. You got down into California at some point.
We left Camp White, and there was 3 officers and myself. We took what they call a recon, which is an overgrown Jeep, and we drove down to. But along the way, we took the outer. I think it was A1A or something, right along the ocean.
Right.
It was just a beautiful trip, and when you see something special, it's, oh, let's go look at this. And so we'd go over and drive over maybe a big waterfall or maybe some just overlook. And so we had a good time, and I lived right with them, lived in the hotels and waiting at good restaurants, and so it was kind of fun. So my service time wasn't that bad.
Okay. Now, where were you going on this trip? What was the?
Well, we was going down San Luis Obispo, California.
All right. And what was the purpose of that?
Well, that was probably the last training that the infantry would have before we went back to San Francisco to go overseas.
All right. So did the whole division actually move down to San Luis Obispo?
Yes,
Then
yeah.
they transferred down there.
We just went by ourselves, just with this one recon and the
Right.
4 of us. But then the infantry, they all moved in convoys, and yeah.
Well, they all moved them down there.
Yeah.
All right. And were they getting mountain training or desert training or?
I don't really know.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have much to do down there. That was kind of a easy life for us there.
Okay. Now, let's see. This has you. Then you go to San Francisco. Then sort of July of '44 at that point, and then you're there about a week or something like that. And then they ship you out to Hawaii next. Was that?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Now, how did they get you out there? What kind of ship were you on?
It was a Kaiser, one of the Kaisers.
So like one of the Liberty ships?
Yeah,
or
Liberty
Victory
ship,
or
yeah.
something? Okay.
And an interesting thing, I read just a short time ago that by the time the war ended, that they were building one ship a day, which almost sounds impossible. But I read that, and so
At some point, they had tried to figure out what was the record time they could do it in, and it was something like build one in a day. I mean, usually it took a few days. But,
Oh, yeah.
But they were making an awful lot of them. Now, what was that like to sail in?
kind of bouncy. Yeah, and they would. You would think the way, and sometimes you get pretty rough seas out there, and you say, man, I don't know how this thing will hold together, but it was apparently built with good steel, and that's the secret of it. That the steel was flexible enough so it can move some.
All right. Now, who was actually on the ship? Was sort of the whole? Was there a company or a battalion or the whole headquarters or?
I don't know how many. I would imagine the whole division headquarters probably would be. It would probably take a ship.
All right. And then were you bunked down below someplace, or were you up above the water?
No, I was down below. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I usually try to find a place where I could just kind of sleep in and just don't let anybody bother me. So I get way up in the front in the window, and
Kind of get out of the way.
Yeah.
Now, were there people getting sick on the trip? Was that sort of a
Well,
regular thing, or?
actually, I don't know for most of them, but a lot of them got sick just right at the harbor.
Right.
Because they would load us in, the soldiers, and then they would load all the other equipment and whatever they had to do. So as we were standing here, that ship just kind of just moved just a very little bit, and after a while, your stomach starts to move a little bit, and then, boy, over the railing, I got so terrible sick. But then, interestingly enough, though, that when we left Okinawa to go to Mindoro in the Philippines, we were on the edge of a typhoon, not right in the middle of it, but right on the edge of it, and that ship would go way up in the air, and then it come palunk. In the other end, the propeller would just be up in midair and just spinning wild. Oh, and yet I never got sick at that time. So
you might have been too scared at that point.
Probably. No, I don't know. You don't really think of it that way. And people say, even when the bullets are flying, there's something that it's been ingrained in you in those couple of years of training that you sort of accept the fact that bullets are going to be flying.
And so in this case, the waves are going to have you bouncing, and
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
part of what you do. All right. Now, they take you go out, you ship out to Hawaii then in the middle of 44. What did they have you do once you get to Hawaii?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but we didn't have much to do at all, very little. And so we would at least every other day we'd go down to the water, and we'd take, they call them mattress covers. They were a heavy muslin material, and we would hold them open and run against the wind, and then fold them, and then we would ride the waves out, and we just had a ball with them things out there.
All right.
And I couldn't swim a stroke, and that's how crazy here I'm out there.
You're out there in the water sailing around. All right. Now, was the rest of the division, were they doing jungle training?
Jungle training, yeah.
And then, so while they're out there training and so forth, you weren't doing divisional maneuvers or things like that. So you didn't have a whole lot to do.
We didn't have much to do at all, no.
Okay. Then where do you go from Hawaii then?
Well, from Hawaii, there was some stops along the way, but then we went, and there was a whole armada that joined out in the middle of the ocean there somewhere. And then that was to make the landing in the Leyte in the Philippines.
Okay, so that's going to be October of 44. Now, once the Armada was assembled and as you head into Leyte, did you have any problems with enemy aircraft or submarines or things like that?
Submarines, I don't know of any that we had in our outfit, but there were certainly submarines around. But they had these planes, and they were pretty wicked. And they had these kamikaze planes, and we had landed in Leyte the first day, and I was shuffling vehicles off the ship, and all of a sudden they said, we're moving out to sea. Well, they got the word that the Japs were coming with their planes, and so they wanted to spread them out because they're all lined up there, and so they're a good target. So then I got back on the ship, and I went out to sea.
And did you see any Japanese aircraft or any kamikazes?
Oh yeah, lots of them.
All right. Did you see they actually hit any of the ships that you saw? Or?
They hit one just right next door to us, and it did a lot of damage. It didn't sink it at all, but it did a terrible lot of damage because there's.
Now, did you know at the time that a large chunk of the Japanese Navy was heading in right at you?
We didn't know about it.
Okay, because there was a big
read
naval
about
battle
later.
that was fought in Leyte Gulf right about that time, and that may have been part of why it was that you were leaving. Those guys were coming in the other end.
Yeah.
And that was where the destroyer escorts and the escort carriers somehow or other managed to defend them off and get them to leave.
Yeah, amazing. It still amazes me after all these years and all the things that happened that we ever assembled enough equipment and armament when we had almost nothing to start with.
Right.
It just amazes me that we could, switch from building automobiles to building tanks and jeeps and whatever.
Yeah. Now, were you in a position at the landing in Leyte to kind of observe what was going on and see all the ships together and the whole process of landing and so forth, or at least of unloading supplies and things after the first soldiers were in?
Well, your scope is not very far because you're just working in this one area, and of course, maybe there was a couple of ships there, but they were, staggered along.
Okay. Now you said you were unloading vehicles and so forth. Were you using cranes to lift them out, or were you using LSTs?
Drive them. You could just drive them right out.
And
They would They would drop them ships right close to us there, and so
well, did they have LSTs, the big ships with the doors that opened in front and you
yeah,
just drive right
yeah.
out of them?
I don't know where we got onto those. I guess I'd forgotten about that because that's the way they did. They just opened up and we could drive all the vehicles right out. So I don't know at what point that we got from the Kaiser ships to the landing crafts. I don't know that.
Yeah. But at some point, since you were a driver, part of your assignment then is to just bring some of the divisional equipment off and so
Sure.
forth and
Yep.
do that. Okay. Now, you're landing and then they send you back out to sea again. Did that just last for a day or so? Or?
Oh yeah, I think we'd probably back maybe the next morning probably.
Okay. Now, once you've got the vehicles and so forth unloaded, then what were you doing as the division was kind of pushing inland?
Well, we stayed we weren't very far from the beach at any time. That's kind of where the headquarters stayed but we did get up somewhat because we could see where the vehicles were mired down. It was, of course, it rained every day, and it was just plain. There's no roads. They just made, so these vehicles had to be pulled by bulldozers to get them to where they wanted them, and so it was a mess.
All right. Now, did you have anything to do at that point?
No, not with that.
Yeah, because you really couldn't be driving a surgeon around in a Jeep or something like that at that point. What was the physical setting that you were camped in? I mean, were you still in tents? Did you have huts or things like that?
No, I don't even think we had tents because as I remember, we'd dig a foxhole, just a hole in the ground, and then we'd gather some bushes or some branches and lay in there so you wouldn't lay down in the mud. But then during the night, all of a sudden you could feel that water coming up, but you can't get up because they shoot your head off.
Were you close enough that was a risk, or were there just happening some snipers around? Or?
Oh, they would infiltrate back in. And part of as I understand, they were more than not really out to get you as they are to try to get back where they would be behind the lines, and then they're kind of let go again. So.
Now, were there people in your company who got actually hit by snipers or shot at?
Oh yeah. Oh sure.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, our company commander, our division assistant division commander, he was shot right through his helmet. Was killed.
And do you know anything about how that happened, or was it day or night, or?
Well, it was during the day, but he would go up to the front line every day.
Right.
And he said, if the soldiers can be there, I going to be there.
Right.
And that's the kind of man he was.
But then he was hit then while he was up at the front line, or when he was?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was hit up at the front line.
So it was not as if there were people around the headquarters necessarily taking bullets, or?
No.
Okay.
Not on Leyte. On Okinawa, we did have that. Because there they really tried to get back to the north, and so in fact, well, we can get to that later. But
okay. Now, did you see anything of the civilian population when you were on Leyte? Were there
Oh, yeah.
Filipinos around?
Sure.
What kind of conditions were they living in?
Oh, they had their little huts that were up on stilts, and just maybe 8 foot square, and that's where the whole family is up there. And they have a little hole in the floor where they had to go to the bathroom. They just let it go down there, and the animals would keep it clean down below. It was sort of different looking.
Yeah. So the living conditions there were fairly primitive and so forth.
Very primitive.
Did any of them speak any English? You can recall.
No, not really. But they you could communicate by sign language and
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
Now, did any of them do any work for you? I mean, were there
Oh yeah, they
labor
would.
or wash things or?
Yeah, they would do that. They would. Yeah, they always got so. The ladies would come around and they say, I'd like to do your washing," and so we'd pay them a little bit, and so they thought that was pretty good.
Okay. Now.
And they'd haul water for us.
Right. Okay. Now, so do you spend a long time there? Were you there for several months in one place, or did they move the headquarters around as the division went forward?
No, I think we did move some, but we didn't go very far up because it was virtually impossible to move. It was such a muddy mess.
Right. And were you hearing much about how the division was doing or what was happening up at the front?
Well, we would because we were with division headquarters, so the drivers that come back, and of course they hear it from the general, and then and from other high officers.
Right. And
So-
what impression did you have about sort of what was happening to the division? Were they taking a lot of casualties, for instance? Was it difficult for them, or were they kind of generally moving forward? Or?
Well, they on Leyte, I think the casualties weren't probably real high, but and again I wouldn't have numbers, but a real good friend of mine, he was killed on Leyte, I think about the third or fourth day, and his family they were from Grand Rapids. We were friends back home, and his family would call and say, "Have you heard from Ev?" "Yeah, I heard from Ev." He says, "Boy, we haven't heard anything from Ray." And well, I knew that he had been killed, but of course I couldn't say anything.
So you weren't allowed to communicate
no.
that sort of thing?
No.
And, yeah. Sometimes I guess there were people who had codes set up with their families if they had friends and things, so you could give them the right message and they know. But
Yeah.
basically, it was not your job, and you were not allowed to send any news.
No, you better not get caught. Interesting little side note with that, though, when we were going to land on Okinawa, which was April the 1st, I had written a letter home to my wife or my girlfriend, and I said, April 1's coming pretty quick. I said, "Are you all ready for your birthday?" So the censors blacked out April 1. So April 1 in the morning, boy, the whole family was up because they knew something was going to happen. And so sure enough, we landed on Okinawa. But it was, so they knew
Yeah.
by default.
Right. So that in that case, you did kind of communicate by code.
But I didn't do it. I didn't do it in purpose.
You weren't even thinking about
no,
it that way. You
no,
were
no.
tipping them off because you didn't know you were going to go land someplace. on
No,
April 1st
no
at that point.
idea. No.
All right. Now, you had a camera with you, right? Or you have a fair amount of pictures from your time in the service.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of pictures from various bases where you were and that kind of thing. And that's fairly common. But you also have some taken in the Philippines and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Were you officially allowed to have a camera, or
Sure. Oh, yeah. They never say anything about cameras.
because there was in a lot of units they did. I mean, just as
Oh, yeah.
we were looking at restrictions on what you can write home. But in your case,
Well,
they weren't worrying about it.
but we couldn't send pictures home anyway.
Right.
So we tried to try to keep them as dry as we could and put them in plastic bags or something. But that didn't. When we were on Okinawa, I got acquainted with some people in the Air Force, and they had a lot of equipment there to develop pictures. So I had a little trailer, and I had the developer and the mixer and all this stuff in there, and so I'd make up pictures for a lot of the guys around the outfit because it was didn't come out real good, but not too bad though.
All right. Now, on the Philippines, were there a lot of people who were getting sick there? Did they get malaria or jungle diseases or things
Oh yeah,
like
a lot
that?
of malaria, jungle rot. Yeah, I had both. In fact, my wife just told me the other day. She said, "You know, this is really the first time that your back has really been completely cleared after after 60 some years."
All right,
And,
so
my
finally
whole
the
back
last signs
was
of
just
jungle rot were-
almost. It was an awful sight. It was an awful sight.
And could they do anything to treat it?
Yeah, they give you, I don't know, I think quinine. That was
That's for malaria.
For malaria, which I also had, and Yeah.
Now, at that point, had they gotten reasonably effective at treating malaria? Or it was something that they were used to by then?
Well, they were using quinine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so did you have some bad bouts or really high fevers and things?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, after I got home, I would get them often,
Mm-hmm.
and just boy, it would just knock you right out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Now you're after several months on Lady and so forth, eventually resistance, and I guess. But before we kind of go off of there, you were at divisional headquarters. Did you have an opportunity to see a lot of the high-ranking officers? I mean, did you see MacArthur, for instance?
In fact, I was probably 100 yards from MacArthur when he came ashore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, was that sort of a staged event with cameras and things like that when you
No.
saw him do it, or?
Not that I remember. No. I'm sure there was news people with him,
Mm-hmm.
because he was quite the man, and he was a man that he liked the press,
Mm-hmm.
and but he was a brilliant soldier. I had nothing but highest regard for him.
Okay. So he didn't have necessarily a negative reputation among the soldiers
Oh no,
and people that you were serving with.
no. I think that everybody admired him. He was an unusual person to know, and I guess going back to the Philippines was his number one.
Right.
Because he was, he said that he would be back,
Mm-hmm.
and that was his famous last words, or famous words.
Right.
I will return, or I
return,
have
yeah.
returned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you're basically there until the fighting on Leyte is pretty well over.
Yeah.
Now, from Leyte, where did you go directly to Okinawa next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're loading up. Now, what was the Okinawa trip like? I mean, were you again going with a large convoy?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Did it seem pretty much the same as what you did when you went into Leyte, or was it different?
Well, actually, Leyte was the coming ashore at Leyte was like coming ashore in Grand Haven.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody to greet you.
Right.
You just came ashore. I came down the ropes on the side of the ship to get into
A landing craft?
a little small landing craft with my Jeep on it. That's my Jeep and me and the two guys that running that thing. Well, I was probably almost down to the bottom to hop in the Jeep, and I could hear them say, "Call for smoke." And so they covered that whole area with smoke, and it was like absolutely pitch dark.
Mm-hmm.
And got into the Jeep, and from there on, I don't know whatever happened. I mean, it was just night.
So they were using smoke were the Japanese trying to fire at you at that point?
Well, they were, but see, that way they couldn't see the individual ships. They could probably come. So, but they apparently got the word that the Japanese planes were coming.
Right.
So, then I just crawled up in the Jeep and went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And next morning, we ended up with about a dozen these little landing craft all tied together, just kind of bobbing out in the water.
So you were still out in the water the whole time?
Yeah,
The smoke was
yeah.
up so that you didn't land then on that first day?
No,
You just
no.
loading up and then sitting there?
So even though I was off the ship the first day, I didn't get on land until the next day.
Okay. Now, what was the scene like by the time you landed the next day? So the smoke blown away by then?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. Now, what could you see when you went in? I mean, were there damaged ships or things like that? Or
Nothing. No. Everything was. It was just like nothing could happen. Nothing had happened. We, in fact, as they brought me as far as they could, and he said, "Hey, we got to dump you off." And so, okay, they let the Jeep and me off, and we going in, and all of a sudden we hit a crater, and we nosedived into the crater, and of course that was the end of that. So finally,
Now, was the crater, was that onshore, or was that still on the in
no,
the
it was
water?
out in the water. We were probably driving through probably 18 inches of water, probably maybe at least, because I would get wet driving in.
Yeah.
So there I sat, and then one of these big ducks came along, and they said, "We'll get you out of there." So they hooked onto the Jeep and pulled me through, and then
Now, did the Jeep still run when you got out?
Oh, yeah.
Had they waterproofed the engine?
Oh, there.
somehow?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, they would take a lot of water because we had pipes that would go up in the air, and they were all sealed down below, so
Okay.
they could virtually run underwater. Yeah.
All right. Now, once you got on shore, was there any sign that there had been fighting there, particularly? Were there?
No.
No. It was just clean.
In fact, I had no idea where I was, and finally, somebody came along and I said, "Any idea where division headquarters is?" And he said, "Yeah, they're down the road here about a mile." Well, went down there and everything was moving along so smooth. They said, well, something, it's kind of leery. Well, then once they got into the eyesight of the Japanese, where we were in these caves and stuff, and they had the mountains there hollowed out with these like a narrow gauge railroad. And then they would take them guns and run them out there and shoot a fire, bang, bang, and then they pull them back in again. So it was hard to get in there to get them.
Okay. Now, were you in a position where you could observe any of that, or were you in areas in the river? So you're just hearing about this from other people?
No, we couldn't. We didn't see any of it. Excuse me.
Now, did you see much of any Japanese activity at all? I mean, did you see aircraft or kamikazes or things like that when you were on Okinawa?
Yeah, we saw quite a bit of aircraft. Yeah.
Okay. And when they were coming and they were trying to bomb or strafe, or were they mostly kamikazes?
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then were our aircraft around any place? And were there American planes trying to shoot them down?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And were you in a position to kind of watch fighting in the air?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was sometimes very interesting. We we had a spotter plane. Excuse me. It was, I think, a Piper Cub.
Yep.
In fact, the fellow from Grand Rapids was a pilot, and they would take these planes, and the Japs would come after them with zeros. And this little Piper Cub would go right to the mountain, and he'd make a quick turn, and the Jap couldn't turn, and so he'd fly right into the mountain. So.
Okay. Now the Piper Cub, was that being used sort of for artillery observation?
Artillery.
Yeah.
Yeah, as spotters.
Right.
Yeah.
A dangerous job in a lot of cases.
Very dangerous. Yeah.
Like that. Did the Grand Rapids pilot manage to survive? Or?
Yep. In fact, he died probably 5-6 years ago, I think. Yeah.
All right. Now, what did your duty consist of while you were on Okinawa?
We probably did the same thing. If the officers wanted to go up to the front, we'd go up to the front lines or fairly close, very often. Yeah.
Were you still working with the doctor, or was he?
Yep, and the dental officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, was the division taking a lot of casualties then on Okinawa? Were you having a lot of men get hit?
Yeah, there was. I think they lost something like 1,500 that were actually killed.
Right.
And then there was maybe 35. Excuse me, maybe 3,500 that were shot
Wounded,
in different. So, see if that'll help my throat a little bit.
We're giving you a pretty good workout here.
No.
All right. Rescue that. Okay. Now, but where you were most of the time, you were relatively safe. I mean, you were not coming under fire from anything, or they didn't shoot artillery toward the headquarters, or
No.
anything like that. Now, was that kind of a sort of a strange situation to be in, where your unit is up there and they're getting shot at and they're taking casualties and so forth, and you're kind of back there and not having to get into that? Did you just take it for granted? You're just doing your job?
Well, we had different job to do than the people up in the front lines, of course. But we did have times where we'd have to guard the perimeter of the headquarters division. And one night, one of the fellows that was on guard, he's supposed to be on guard, he fell asleep. and all of a sudden he must have dreamed that the Japs were infiltrating into the camp, and he got up and he started shooting. And real close friend of mine ran out of the tent and out, and he tripped a flare, these flares that go up with a parachute, and this thing blew his face right off. And they took him in, and one of the officers there that said, "Hey, there's no sense in trying to do anything," because he said he can't live. There was a sergeant there he had trained at Mayo as a male nurse, and he said, "No way, as long as he's breathing, we're going to try." And so he just packed them full of towels. They got him on a Jeep, and they took him to the aid station, and from there on, and so we sort of assumed that he had died, because we never heard a thing. And then in May, I got married, May of 46, got married. We was home on a Saturday morning, and the phone rang. It was almost noon, and somebody, they were garble, and all I heard was Morton. I said to my wife, somebody's down at Morton Hotel. So I went down there, and here's these three guys come down the steps, and they looked like they were little miniature elephants. They had a tusk that went down, but what they were doing is grafting skin from their stomach up to here. Just and so this Ray Binder, this friend of mine, and he had made it, and he was at Percy Jones Hospital. Later on, I found out he married a nurse from Percy Jones Hospital, and lived down in Illinois, and he has 2 girls, and they were, I think one's a doctor and the other's an attorney, and then the other one. So he had a wonderful family, but I got to see him a few times, and.
But he was just lucky you had the right sergeant in the right place at that point.
You bet.
All right. Now, did you have problems with Japanese infiltrators? I mean, was that an issue?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What would they be doing? Were they just trying
Well,
to
I
get
think
away,
actually they were just trying to get back away from the front lines. I think that's really what they were trying to do, just get up to the north and just get out of the way.
just hide in the hills someplace and wait for everything to be over?
Wait till it's over, because that part of the land was secured. So they figured if they could get up there, then they would wait the war out.
Okay. Now, were you on Okinawa then until the Japanese surrendered there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, once they
I was actually on when they surrendered. We were on the ship out in the bay, waiting to go to Mindoro. And then we were going to regroup again. Our division was scheduled to go to Tokyo.
Right.
So fortunately, but I should tell a little side story. I was on guard this one night and laying in a foxhole, and I could hear thump, 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 and I could see with the snooper scope, I could see. Looked like 4 soldiers marching, and I kept watching, and I was getting pretty tense. Boy, I don't know. I got to get them a little closer. All of a sudden, I realized it's a horse. Because the feet that are moving, and you couldn't see the upper part. It looked just like 4 soldiers marching there.
Right.
And they went down just a little further, and all of a sudden, I could hear somebody with a gunfire. And they shot that horse. They thought the same thing that I did. And,
yeah, that must have been kind of a surprise. You wouldn't really expect to see a horse show up in that sort of situation. I mean,
no.
Would have been shot or eaten or something a long time ago.
No.
Yeah. Okay. But now, were you on Okinawa at the time when the Japanese on Okinawa surrendered? Because I think you were kind of preparing to leave. Okay. So we pause here. Yeah. Okay. Means we've killed the first hour successfully. So,
oh, okay.
Well. That should do.
You're good.
Okay. All right. So we were talking about, I was asking, the Japanese on Okinawa, they surrendered, I think, in June of 45. Now, are you still on Okinawa?
It was in July.
Okay, in July. All right.
July, yeah.
And were you still there at that time?
I was out in the ship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And then
did you not see anything of the Japanese prisoners or anything like that?
no, no. Well, while we were out there, and my birthday was on August 13th, and all of a sudden, the whole island lit up with gunfire and every tracer bullets, and several people were killed actually.
Just by falling
Yeah,
ammunition?
whatever happened, but so we knew that we were pretty sure that was the end of the war, and so we pretty happy that we could instead of going down to Philippines and getting regrouped again, we're going to go down there and go home.
Now, did you stop off in the Philippines? Did you stop in Mindoro? Or?
Yeah, I was. We stopped in. I was there quite a little while, and there again, we didn't really have much to do.
Right.
The officers they didn't do a lot of the running around, but we had gotten a new assistant division commander, and a general by the name of General McCuniff. I think he was the general that run the jungle training in Hawaii. So he came up to our division as the assistant division commander, and so he would come on over. I was a dispatcher at that time, and I had a little monkey that I don't know where I got it from, but anyway, I had this monkey, and I used to have a lot of fun with it. Well, this general would come down, and he would sit in the tent with me, and we monkeys would run around and play together and having a good time. And he was just as ordinary a guy as you'd ever meet. Well, first time, of course, when he come, you salute, and when he come in, and he said, no, forget that. He said, the war's over. So we were there one day there was probably half a dozen of us sitting in there with this general, and we just gotten a new, I think he was a motor officer, but I'm not sure, a second lieutenant just out of OCS, and he came in the tent, he saluted and he said, attention, and everybody kind of looked, and he thought, what's the matter with these guys? They don't even know enough to stand up. Well, he says, you guys are going to be court-martialed. Whoa. So I went to see our company commander, and I said, I think that we guys are in trouble. He said, what happened? And I told him what happened, and he says, no, don't worry about it. He said, we'll take care of that. Next day, he was sent down to infantry. So, but, the war was over, and everybody was just pretty content just to get ready to go home.
All right. Now, then did you have to stay on Mindoro for some time? Were you there for a few months, basically?
Yeah. I don't remember just how long, but quite a little while. But we used to go. There was a airport, or not airport, but a runway.
Right.
Not too far from us there, and we used to take jeeps down there and race them. And so we just had kind of fun. The war was over, and so we were just doing what we had to do for fun.
So you're just biding your time.
Yeah, that's all.
At this point, were there people who were beginning to be sent home on points and that kind of thing? There were some.
Yep.
Guys?
Oh yeah.
All right. Now, when you left, I guess in December, did you go just by yourself, or was the whole unit being shipped back at that point?
No, we were. I went a few days ahead of time because I had gotten a Purple Heart, and so I had a point or something, so that helped a little.
How did you get the Purple Heart?
Well, I got hit.
That.
I got hit on Okinawa. We had been up towards the front lines with the dental officer and the division surgeon. We were on our way back, and I could hear these guys hollering up the hill there, and he said, "Help! Help!" So I said to the officers, I said, Steve, I need help. There's something wrong there. So he said, we're not going up there. I said, I'll go. So I grabbed my gun and I went up. And they said, there's Japs in the cave here, and we daren't leave because they're going to shoot us if we leave. So I took a hand grenade, and I threw the hand grenade in. And that hand grenade came back and hit me because I didn't hold it long enough, hold the pin long enough. And so I got hit, but it wasn't that bad. So then, man, I got to do something else. So I grabbed a white phosphorus grenade, and I held it long enough, and I threw it in. And man, these guys come screaming out of there. And then, of course, that was the end of them.
All right. Now you were hit. Was it just? Did you have just shrapnel in the leg, or what was it? But you were still. But were you able to kind of make your way back down again?
Oh yeah, it wasn't that bad.
And what was the response of the officers when you got back to them? They say, "Well, we told you so."
Yeah. I said, well, I said, I hate to see. Actually, it turns out that these guys were sailors, and they were out looking for souvenirs. And so
this was not even quite all the way up to the front line at that
point.
Oh,
no, they were back.
That was where the Japanese were holed up and hadn't been noticed.
Probably these guys probably had traveled during the night and they stayed there during the day. Right. Well, then these sailors looked in that cave in that tomb and says, "Whoa, we got to get out of here."
All right. Well,
that they were afraid to run because they thought, well, these guys would shoot them.
Sure. And they weren't really trained to deal with that kind of thing either.
No.
But you were carrying grenades around. You were carrying grenades and so forth?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but anyway, at least the Purple Heart got you out a little bit early. So, how did you get back to the States? Just another Liberty ship or troop ship?
Yep, another troop ship. And interestingly enough, on that troop ship home, I traveled with a fellow by the name of Dick Keshner. And Dick was a violinist. He had a Stradivarius that he took with him overseas.
Wow!
And he was with a band, and so we were getting close to San Francisco. And I said, "Dick, what are you going to do when you get home?" He says, "Oh, I'll probably hang around Hollywood and play for the stars over there." And he was good. He was a real violinist, and so. That was kind of the end of that. We shook hands and he left and we left. And then we were home. Oh, we'd gotten married and we was home. And television had just come out. And my brother-in-law bought one of the first ones they had. And he says, "You got to come over and see television." So we went there and we turned it on and watching. And I said, "Hey, I know that guy." We were watching Lawrence Welk. And I said, "I know this guy." He says, "Baloney, you don't know him." I said, "That's Dick Keshner." So a little while later, it said, "Dick Keshner will have a violin solo." And so I got, I went to one of the reunions, and one of the guys there said, "Ev, you were a friend of Dick Keshner, weren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, a little bit, not real close friend, but you were friendly." He said, "I brought you a record. And I brought you a couple of tapes of his." And so I had them. I kind of cherished.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
All right. Now, once you got back, how long was it before you got married?
Well, I got married. I got back. I think the 2nd of January. I got married in May, May 10.
All right. Now, what kind of work did you go into at that point?
Well, before I went in, I was working for an oil refinery. There were gasoline where they, and so I got back and I went back to work there. And then they were getting ready to move that whole plant from Grand Rapids to Findlay, Ohio, and they wanted me to go with them down to Findlay. And I said, "No," I said, "I'm just married here, and all my friends, everybody's here," and so I didn't. So I went down, had signed up for unemployment, and so every day you'd have to, I think once a week you'd have to go in and show that you went out looking for jobs for 3 or 4 places. Well, the first one they sent me to, and the guy said, "Well, do you know how to do this, how to do that? And can you read a blueprint?" And I said, "Sure." So I got a job right away, so I didn't get any time off. But I worked for a company by the name of Weidenfeller Engineering, and they put in refrigeration, these cherry freezing plants and ice making plants. We did all that kind of stuff. So did that for a few years until we had a little boy, and I said, "This is no business. I'm out of town. You know, leave Monday morning, come back Friday night," because we were all over the state.
Right.
So I told the foreman that I was, going to look for something else, and so a couple minutes later he came back out and he says, "The boss wants to see you." And I said, "Okay." So I went in and he says, "What's this? You want to leave?" And I said, "Yeah, I thought I'd give you a little notice." And he says, "You don't give me no notice." He says, "You're fired."
Okay.
So that was kind of the end of that. But then we were building a new home at that time, and so I thought, well, I'll go help work on the house. And I was on my way over there, met the plumber that had doing the plumbing, and he said, "How come you're not working?" I said, "I just got laid off." And he says, "Hey, go see my brother. He's looking for somebody to be a plumber." So I did that, and I got hired, and so went on for some months, and then he decided he wanted to put in, have somebody put in underground sprinkling. So that was a little side business that he was running, and so he asked me if I wanted to run that for him. So he says, "You can hire 3 or 4 guys, whatever." So that's what I did, and then probably a year or so later he went broke, and so I decided, well, I'm going to go into business. But he didn't go broke on the plumbing. I mean, on the sprinkler. He went broke in the plumbing division. So that's what put me in the underground sprinkling business.
Okay, and is that kind of where then you stayed then for some time?
Yeah, I stayed in that until I retired. Actually, I sold a business. I took in a partner, and that didn't go very well. But anyway, I had built a building in the meantime, and so I'd rent out a bunch of offices out of it, and so that kind of was my retirement. Then about a year and a half later, my son decided he wanted to go into the sprinkling business, and now my grandson is almost taken over for him already. So yeah.
All right. And to look back on the whole thing now, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you? Did it kind of change the way you dealt with people or looked at the world, or was it just a job that you did and then you came home?
No, I think it changes you. I think you probably look at politics a little bit different, and I think try to say, hey, are we going to get into another mess because somebody isn't doing their job right, or so? But I think it has that effect on you.
All right. Well, it makes for a good story. You tell it well, and thank you for coming in and talking to me today.
You're welcome.
All right.
Glad I could do it.
So now we can just switch the mic.